We all rely on farmers and ranchers, but farming is riskier than other businesses out there. Crop insurance helps farmers manage their risk. With crop insurance, farmers put skin in the game by paying premiums and shouldering deductibles. That keeps taxpayers from having to pick up the whole bill every time disaster strikes. Today, about 90% of U.S. farmland is insured, providing $100 billion in protection to more than 130 different kinds of crops. It's a testament to the program's success.
Thank you for joining us for our Agri-Pulse Washington Week in Review. I'm Spencer Chase, joined as always by Agri-Pulse Executive Editor Phil Brasher, discussing the week that was, agriculturally speaking, in Washington, D.C. And in Washington, D.C., the big news that we saw emerged kind of late into the afternoon, early into the evening, maybe even late into the evening, Thursday night, depending on your perspective. But one of the biggest items facing Congress leading into this busy December agenda was the fact that there was a looming government shutdown, government funding set to expire today, actually, as we record this on Friday, December 3rd. But Phil, on Thursday, we did see the House and Senate come to a certain level of agreement to keep the government funded.
Yes, it be funded through February the 18th now, so no worry about a shutdown until then. Maybe we'll be back into this in February. The problem is that the new fiscal year 2022 started back on October 1st. There's been very little sign of progress and agreement between the House and the Senate on spending legislation to fund the government for 2022. And so we are stuck now continuing to fund the government at fiscal 2021 levels under these stopgap bills. We had one started October the 1st. It was due to run out today. The new one, the new continuing resolution will carry us to February 18th, and then we'll see if they can get a deal on spending for them.
About 5 months into the next fiscal year, they're going to fund the fiscal year. Quite the way Congress can work sometimes. But Phil, as I mentioned, kind of at the top of the recording here, at the beginning of December, there was really kind of a number of real big issues facing Congress, facing Washington. Obviously, government funding being one of them, but there's still a couple of other, big issues potentially facing Congress that they might need to act on here before the end of the month. Primarily being the debt ceiling, which is set to be reached, depending on who you listen to, within the next couple of weeks, and also the Build Back Better reconciliation package, so important to many congressional Democrats.
Yes, and important in many ways to agriculture as well, because of the provisions are in that bill for conservation, climate smart practices, and also child nutrition. There's about $90 billion in there in total, plus new and expanded incentives for biofuels. Big deal for renewable diesel, biodiesel, and potentially sustainable aviation fuel, all new. And potentially expanding uses of agricultural products. Big question, that bill is not going to get any Republican support. Democrats got to put something together that can keep all 50 of their Senate members on board. Big one still has not said what he's going to do. He keeps talking about wanting to push this into 2022. And of course, that's Joe Manchin, a Democratic senator from West Virginia. So very unclear whether we're going to get a resolution on that before Christmas.
And in the meantime, we have seen not reconciliation infrastructure package that was sort of tied in tandem with the reconciliation package for a while. That has been passed and signed into law, and now we await to see what Congress will do on that reconciliation package, and whether or not those agriculture provisions in there will take a haircut. Because, Phil, when we saw the package go down from in the neighborhood of $3 trillion to now in the neighborhood of 1.75 to 2 trillion, the agriculture provisions stayed largely intact and really didn't take a big funding cut in that process.
Yeah, there were some cuts. The forestry section got cut. You're talking about the reconciliation bill, the Build Back Better bill. Child nutrition got cut somewhat. Research funding got cut somewhat. The conservation part did not. Pretty much stayed almost as it had been first proposed back in August and September. So again, it continues about $27 billion for most of that for Farm Bill conservation programs. Still there. We're watching that. A lot of interest in the agriculture community and what happens to that. It's new funding that will go into the Farm Bill. Potentially could be used to create new baseline, sort of permanently higher spending level for conservation. But we'll see. That's a couple of steps beyond this bill down the road into the next Farm Bill.
So definitely something to watch going forward on that, and as Phil mentioned, into the next Farm Bill process. But before we let you go this week, do want to just briefly touch on another action out of the Biden administration, specifically the Food and Drug Administration. Something on the produce and produce water rules, something we've been following for a while, and the industry has really been following for quite a while. Phil, what can you tell us about what we learned in terms of the FDA's action this week?
Right. The FDA several years ago was out of concern about contamination incidents that had been traced back to water that was tainted with the E. coli and other forms of bacteria. It required farms to start testing for microbial contamination in the water they used for irrigation. It was a tremendous concern to farms of kind of all sizes. FDA agreed to go back and rethink that, and yesterday they came out with a completely different proposal set of standards. They would require farms to do comprehensive assessments of their water and then take steps to deal with any contamination or risk that's found based on what those assessments find. This is a big change in how this would be done. The microbial testing requirements that farms are so concerned about are still set to take effect early next year for large farms. And so these grower groups are taking a look at this and going through it and seeing how this will work and how it compares to what FDA had been requiring.
So a bit of a change from the previous regime there, and obviously you can learn a little bit more about that change in our coverage on agripulse.com, where we also have the latest on all of the various developments that we saw from a fairly active week in farm policy in Washington, D.C., and looking forward to potentially a few more busy weeks as Congress does its typical December sprints to wrap up some issues before the end of the year, before looking to start fresh in the new year. And we'll be sure to keep an eye on all of that in our coverage on agripulse.com. But I think that's going to do it for this week. So for Phil Brasher, I'm Spencer Chase. Have a good one.